Please tell me about the borders of the NLP. The borders of the NLP practitioner, on your opinion.
The borders?
Yes, the edge of the NLP. What is the essence of the NLP, and what is not NLP, but some people think that it is NLP?
Well, NLP is basically a communication model. It started by by modeling three communicators. They happen to be therapeutic communicators, but it modeled communication. It started with the transformational grammar, about linguistics, about how language works, and then how language works in our bodies, in our neurology. So it's a communication model. But because everything in human life is a function of communication. How you think is self-communication. How we talk to somebody else is relationship. So NLP is a communication model. And it's about verbal and nonverbal communication methodologies. And through communication then, it's about how any experience is formulated in thought and concept in language. And that's why we can model anything. We can break it down to the communication features. And so every model of NLP is a communication model. So the strategy model, the linguistic models, the meta-programs models, it's all about language.
Sometimes people says that NLP is a set of knowledges which were known before the NLP.
Yeah.
What do you think about it?
Well, sure. Yeah, NLP put together a lot of the common knowledges and a lot of the things that had emerged in many different fields, but nobody had put it together in the way that Richard and John put it together originally.
Is it good for humanity that Richard and John put it together and give us NLP?
Oh, definitely.
Why?
Well, it details out the cognitive behavioral model. So NLP is a cognitive behavioral model, and it details out, it fleshes out in details what the cognitive models knew conceptually, and it broke it down. And Gregory Bateson's introduction to the first book of NLP, The Structure of Magic, his introduction said, for 30 years we've been looking for the variable to explain human consciousness, and who would have thought that it would show up as the human senses? Seeing, hearing, feeling, smelling, taste. He said, these two young men, Richard and John at the time, 1975, these two men took something that was so obvious, it was so obvious we missed it. And they found the language of thought. And that's the genius of NLP. NLP found the language of thought. Now Titchener, the first psychologist in Germany in 1880, he detailed out the senses. And he thought this would be the language of thought, but then he tried to treat it like a mathematical thing. He thought that it would be a periodical table, just like the chemistry table, and so he went off in that direction, and it just made it irrelevant. So no one picked up on it until 100 years later, in 1972. And so what Richard and John did, it had been in psychology, and so Titchener was close to it. Alfred Adler was close to it. William James was close to it. A lot of people came very, very close, but nobody put it together until Richard and John.
How do you do your modeling? What do you start from?
Well, it always starts from seeing some expertise that I want. So,
and how do you decide which expertise do you want?
Usually because I got a problem.
Yes, really.
So the first thing I ever modeled was resilience, because I knew that I needed, when things set me back, just to come back, just to bounce back. So I modeled resilience, because I wanted resilience, because I had gone through a divorce, and it took years to get over it, and I wasn't very resilient. Then I modeled 2 or 3 smaller things, but then I knew that I needed to sell myself, so I modeled selling. Then it was the next thing was leadership, and then, well, there's been a number of different things, mostly then the wealth creation, because I wanted to stop living paycheck to paycheck. And so usually it was my problems, and knowing that human beings know how to solve this problem. I don't know how to solve this problem. So let me just find out someone who is very skilled, has expertise in this area, and let me model it. And so that's how I choose it. Usually it's my problem.
Do you like problems? Do you like?
I love problems. Because problems is money.
Are there enough money for everybody in the world?
Oh, sure.
But there are a lot of people who don't receive enough money for a living, and they are not very positive.
Yeah.
Sometimes they invented some models which are not coincide with NLP presupposition.
Yeah.
What would you recommend to these people?
Well, first to learn NLP. They need to learn to run their own brains and quit acting like victims. They need to take control of their life, take responsibility, and to know what wealth is. Wealth is not money. But we some days on the stock exchanges around the world, some days $1 billion is added that didn't exist the day before. $1 billion. Where'd it come from? Well, we just created. With the recession that occurred 2 years ago in 2008, we lost $1 trillion. Where'd it go? Well, money is a construct, and so there's plenty. And so it's a matter of tapping into the resources of people to add value to the lives of other people. Money is what we pay for value added.
Sometimes people says it's very difficult to add values. I'd like to have another way, which will be more easier, and to receive money now, just now, 5 minutes, and you will receive.
Yeah. Well, that's nice wishful thinking.
Yesterday I received a letter and somebody wrote, only 1 hour you will read a book about wealthy father and you will be rich in the evening. What do you think about it?
Well, that's wishful thinking. That's how a child thinks. A 3-year-old thinks that way. A 5-year-old thinks that way. We call that magical thinking. And in developmental psychology, we know that people will grow out of it and they'll face reality. And so people who are still magical thinking, wishful thinking, they haven't grown up.
What different Bill Gates from this type of people with magical thinking? What's the difference between Bill Gates?
Well, he faces reality. He knows that money will only come when he adds value. This is the paradox. To get richer, you have to give. The more you give, the more you can get. But you're not going to get anything if you won't give. It's adding value.
What did NLP add? Which value did NLP add in the world?
Well, NLP added that distinction of the language of thought. So then, Richard and John could take a model, the cognitive behavior model of George Miller, and the TOTE model. The TOTE model is a wonderful little model, but it's worthless without detailing it down to representations. When you can detail it down to representations, we can create the spelling strategy, the motivation strategy, the decision strategy. When we detail it down, we can be specific and we can replicate excellence. So NLP added the language of thought.
Are there any examples of the excellence which people taught with NLP?
Well, I just mentioned those. The spelling strategy. Up until NLP, people did not, as something as simple as spelling, and NLP identified that the leverage point that makes it magical is visualization. Visualize, see the word, don't sound it out, it's not auditorily driven, just see it backwards, see it forwards, see it as a word, see it as a picture. Now you got the strategy, you can spell well.